Welcome everyone, and thank you so much for joining us today. I'm Alexandra, a Marketing Manager here at Perficient. I'm excited to be moderating today's webinar on disruption in the insurance industry. We are recording today and we'll be emailing you after the session with information on how to access the recording and the slide deck. Time permitting, we'll also be taking questions at the end of the presentation through the chat window. At any time during the presentation, please feel free to use the chat window to ask questions. We'll also be asking some polling questions during the presentation, so keep an eye out for those. In a moment, I'll hand it over to our speakers, but first let me give you a quick overview of Perficient. We are the leading digital transformation consulting firm serving Global 2000 and enterprise customers here in North America. Perficient and our agency deliver information technology, management consulting, and creative capabilities. We were founded in 1997 and have about 3,000 employees. We form strategic partnerships with each of the major technology vendors, including IBM, which we'll be talking about a little bit today. I'd also like to give a quick intro around the practices that our speakers cover today. So we have a BPM practice and also a Watson practice, which align to our two speakers. We have consultants dedicated to both areas, and we're an accredited partner with IBM in both Watson and BPM solutions. We have a close relationship with IBM's teams, including partnering with the IBM Watson team for the last 2 years. We also won the IBM Beacon Award for Watson this year, the only award that they gave for cognitive solutions. Finally, a little background on our speakers. Graham Wallace leads our BPM practice here at Perficient. He's been an evangelist for Smarter Process for the last 8 years and has built our BPM and rules practice here at Perficient to be a leader in the BPM space. Christine Livingston leads our IBM Watson practice, combining a background in analytics, unstructured content management, and case management to deliver award-winning Watson solutions. And now I will hand it over to Graham to kick off the session.
My apologies. So sure, in the world today, we see really 4 key areas in the challenges of insurance. We have increased regulatory oversight, we have inconsistent processing guidelines, mandate-based processing, and increased growing number of claims and cost of claims. And a lot of this is due to technology and advances in increasing the technology and allowing you to be able to more easily make a claim. But how do you leverage to lower those costs? How do you decrease your regulatory oversight by reading all that unstructured data? So what we're going to be talking about today is how can we apply Watson and Smarter Process to these solutions, to these challenges, to create solutions that make more sense. So what we find is claims now currently consume 80% of the insurance premiums between payments and costs. So how do you drive that down as an insurance company? This is a common problem that we've been seeing across the board. What we're noticing is that also that 30% of your IT budget is consumed by just pure claims processing. So again, everything is driving down cost. But we can't always just move everything off campus. We can't necessarily always move everything out of the country. So how do you necessarily lower your costs from that perspective? So one of the things we noticed, and as we're about to do a polling question, one of the things we're seeing in the marketplace is that even though all these different channels exist in their place, the phone is their current main entry of claims. So what I'm trying to understand is, in your current environment, what are you seeing as your major way of claims? Are you seeing that your claims are still being entered through phone? Are they still being entered via email? Are they using their online portal? And so the benefit of this is, by understanding this, we can understand how to apply Watson to support a multi-channel solution. That's sort of where we're headed today. I'll give everyone a couple of seconds to enter. So we received responses from the majority of the people. It's still changing a little bit. But in general, you'll see that the phone is still the number way everyone enters claims. So that is the problem. how do you lower your cost of call, cost of claim? And so that's sort of where Watson will come in. And how do we integrate that into a larger overall process? I'll now hand it off to Christine to discuss the Watsons.
Thanks, Graham. So I always like to start out any conversations about Watson by just talking a little bit about what Watson is and what your perception may be. So there is Watson all over the world today. If you watch the Super Bowl, if you've turned on the TV anytime in the last year, you've probably seen IBM Watson. But there's a lot of confusion around what Watson actually is. So is it a tablet that you talk to? Is it a giant server living in a server farm somewhere? Is it a robot that sings and dances? Really, Watson is none of these things, but it is a cognitive platform designed to be integrated and incorporated into your organization. So it's not something you can plug into the wall and immediately see results from, but it's really meant to be a cognitive platform that you can train and educate to think the way your employees think and to understand information the way your employees understand it, and integrate that knowledge into your existing platforms and systems. So we would consider really three pillars the key characteristics of cognitive, and that's really an ability to understand, to reason, and to learn. So understanding means that it can understand both structured and unstructured data, information that comes in, whether it's audio, visual, structured, again, very structured data points. We can understand all types of information at a phenomenal speed and volume with the Watson platform. We don't distinguish the types of information that it can process. Watson can also reason, meaning it can evaluate potential outcomes and make recommendations for the best optimal decision and outcome. And I think the piece that probably gets the most press, quote unquote, is the learning, right? So Watson also is a machine learning platform, which means you are training, not programming it, to be able to solve problems that are just too challenging to solve with traditional if-then-else types of applications, which are, again, most programmatical systems today. So again, in this vein of Watson as a cognitive platform, there are a lot of different offerings that fall underneath this brand of Watson. And there's things, if anyone watched, there was a 60 Minutes episode last fall highlighting artificial intelligence where they showcased Watson for oncology, for example, which was really Watson as this platform trained to understand cancer patients, their medical records, and to actually engage physicians and patients in the care plan process. You also have things like Watson Explorer, which help you understand and consolidate information across forms, do things like text analytics and natural language processing. And then you have the Watson Developer Cloud, which is really the core focus and what we would consider the key cognitive engine behind the Watson platform. So there are about 20 services in the Watson Developer Cloud today. These are changing, so the slide's even a little out of date, but they're kind of grouped by high-level capabilities, again, falling under that cognitive pillar. So you have things that are fairly self-explanatory, like speech-to-text and text-to-speech, where you can converse with people, again, transforming audio into textual content and vice versa. You have things around conversation, which is really how do we engage in a back-and-forth dialogue with someone. And then there's things around data, visual recognition, and really the key focus is on language, which is really, again, where Watson differentiates itself as its ability to understand unstructured data and natural language the way that we communicate with each other. So you have things that do tone analysis, personality insights, that pull entities, relationships, that really understand all of that unstructured content in the way that we engage. And so why we see cognitive as important is everybody's talking about big data. Everybody knows that information is growing very, very quickly, but the point that doesn't get talked about very much is that of all that information growth, 80% of that is unstructured. So that's all the social media, that's all the content we send back and forth, emails we generate. Really the way that we communicate and generate information in our world today is primarily unstructured. And at the same time, you have a millennial generation that is looking to be engaged immediately, consistently, and they expect you to engage them in a very personal, relevant way. So consumers now expect that the information delivered to them is consistent with the reason that they're calling or engaging and is personalized to their experience and who they are as an individual. So you have conflicting agendas here, right? As you're starting to grow the amount of information, you also have to engage people more personally and more relevantly at the same time. So we really see cognitive as a competitive advantage for these enterprises that are looking to enhance their customer experience and customer engagement platforms. This is typically a review for everyone, but just to make sure we're all talking the same language here, again, just a quick review of structured versus unstructured data. Structured data is very easy to quantify and classify. It's information that you can put into things like Excel spreadsheets, relational databases, and it's very structured in that we know what we need to quantify and classify right up front. Your unstructured data is much more challenging to organize using these traditional mechanisms, but this is really how, again, we as people communicate with each other and express ourselves. So a healthcare example is very easy to understand and illustrate this, right? We've all been to the physician where you fill out the form with 30 different checkboxes on the front page. No, I don't have asthma, no, I don't have allergies. But then you may go and you actually express to your physician why you're here, the symptoms you're experiencing, and you actually engage them in a dialogue. And that dialogue is really the unstructured information, but typically where the purpose of that visit lies, and a lot of the information surrounding your history, why you're there, the symptoms you're experiencing, the things that you tried lives as well. So Watson becomes, again, this cognitive platform that fuels applications and systems within your enterprise, of which oftentimes Smarter Process is one of those applications. So I'm going to hand it back to Graham to talk for a minute about what Smarter Process is.
Thank you, Christine. So there are really 4 key imperatives for a Smarter Process. You need to be able to collaborate and do discovery and documentation. So what that means is, if you've ever done Lean or Six Sigma, being able to document your business processes, because there are usually hundreds of business processes or even thousands of business processes in your organization that aren't necessarily documented or processed the same way. My favorite example is, especially in claims, everyone has like this everyone has the official way that they're supposed to do it, but everyone has like this little cheat sheet that when you get them to the actual claim adjuster, they have a little cheat sheet that says, these are the 5 codes that you enter to make this work. And so what we find is that you need to really focus around that. The next piece is process automation and control. So when we're talking about BPM engines, you need to be able to provide a way to support building out your business processes, providing the business to able to build it and understand it. And then finally, control it. So again, going back to that little sheet, oftentimes that sheet varies between call centers or even between business units. That they have different managers. And so building that process control around those and how you make all those rules and processes is very important, which leads right into decision automation. So one of the big things is, how can we prove all the key items, or how do we make all the business decisions the same way every time? How do we make them automated? How do we provide control around who's doing what and how things are going? So another key component is the decision automation. And then finally, the ultimate goal is to provide end-to-end visibility to understand your process. So not only from the rules, the process, but to provide dashboards, provide understanding, provide your business with what they need to do to make the correct business decisions. Do they need to reallocate more resources? Do they need to remove resources and put them elsewhere? Are there any specific things that are tied to the end of day? So wires are a really good thing to do. I need to wire a claim by 4 p.m., otherwise it's not going out today. So those are the kind of things that you can provide from an end-to-end visibility perspective. This is one of my favorite slides. One of the things you want to always think about when you're evaluating a Smarter Process or BPM engine in general is that BPM is an orchestration. So if you're in an orchestra and the maestro is saying, BPM is the maestro saying, my group of violins now play this, my percussion section play this. And so the way that it works is that everyone understands that everyone's got their structured data in their databases, and then sometimes they have a J2E app on top. BPM sits above all that. BPM, the goal of BPM is to orchestrate the humans and the systems. So there's this idea of middleware, and then there's this process orchestration layer that sits above all this. And so in order for a significant orchestration engine, you need to support your modeling. BPMN is the standard notation for all modeling notation, so it needs to support that. It needs to support monitoring. One of the main things that we always talk about on BPM is that it needs to have support metric-driven development. And then once you build your model, it better execute on your workflow. You want to provide governance and optimization. So when we talk about optimization, you want it to be learning over time how to improve your business process, providing the data that maybe we can make a cognitive decision down the road. Business rules, which I already spoke about. And then there's really this whole idea, and we'll talk about this on the next slide, but this idea of cases versus processes versus events. Making sure that you have the different types of processes that exist in your business, because oftentimes it's a hybrid of the following, specifically in insurance. So what makes a smarter process a smart process? The number one thing is that it needs to be business-led collaborative process discovery. So if we go back to the previous slide where I said collaborate in process decision and discovery and automation, every business process that you decide to implement into an environment needs to be led by the business. I have many cases of successes of why that's the case or how that's the thing, but that's one of the key items, and it needs to have be able to make sure that the ramp-up time is very low. Business-driven governance. You want the business to own the deployments. You want the business to be able to make changes to their business rules, to change their processes without necessarily always involving IT. We have an index that we call the continuous process improvement, and what the idea is, once you release your process to production, the next release is right behind it because your process is changing on a day-to-day basis due to regulatory, due to just changes in your business model from day-to-day experiences. Turning insights into action. So what this means is, can I detect events over a period of time? So let's say I received 3 car accidents over the course of the time involving a similar car, not the car that actually was in the accident, but a similar car that caused the accident. Is that something that should be flagged as for fraud, things of that nature? Support for standards. What this means is you want to be able to support the same business process. So the process I design in my discovery phase should look like my process I execute on my implementation phase. And that provides from the collaboration all the way to end-to-end visibility. You want content management, and the wonderful thing about Smart Process is that it has this built-in content management, but it can integrate to any kind of content management solution. At the end of the day, if you have FileNet, if you have Fresco, no matter what you have underneath the hood, SharePoint, it can support all those integrations and provide the data that you need it to be successful. We have Reflexible, Responsive, and UI. With the Spark toolkit that's coming out, it now supports much more complex UIs and supporting how it reacts. The way that we have seen implementations successful is that they're leveraging the UI for certain pieces, and then they're building out their own UI portals for these. So you want to be able, with their built-in REST APIs that they have existing, you wanted to wait so that you can support not only your BPM UIs, but you also want to be able to support your existing UIs. And so this is sort of why this is a key thing. And then the final thing is you want to scale from project to program. So we always talk about this, especially in BPM and Watson combination, is that the pieces, as you want to do, you want to attack a small project and then build it out. We've seen so much more success going from that direction than it would be necessarily going directly from, let's tackle the massive elephants in the room. So this is sort of why we're here. Watson and Smarter Process better together. The next couple of slides, we're going to be talking about how we're leveraging these together in the real world. We are seeing that all of the processes are engaging cognitive solutions going forward, and the clients that aren't engaging them are sort of running behind from that perspective. So in order to stay ahead of the curve and be able to leverage all that unstructured data, it's really time to join those two together. So this is our cognitive process journey map. In today's world, most people are either at the structured data and they have like an application that sits above their structured data to support the different things. You may be at the orchestration layer, which is what I was talking about before, orchestrating, leveraging BPM and Operation Decision Manager. So we're either in the identify, coordinate phase. But now with Watson, we can really start to drive that knowledge down. And now I'm going to hand it back to Christine.
Thanks, Graham. And so really, again, all that bottom structured data orchestration information is what systems do well today. And again, we start to add Watson to augment and expand and scale these solutions in the future. And so the first step there is really to actually understand, identify, and discover your unstructured content. So oftentimes, organizations think they have an understanding of where this unstructured information lives, but they don't really understand the value or the power that's contained within it or how to put it in context of the rest of that structured data. So for example, marrying the claim you have in your claim system to any supporting documentation and understanding the types of information that live within that supporting documentation is a great place to start when you start bringing in your unstructured content. Then the next step is to say, now that we've consolidated, mapped, identified both structured and unstructured data, let's start to actually derive information from it. This is where you start to do entity extraction and text analytics, natural language processing, where you start to actually glean valuable insights and information from that unstructured content to provide a richer picture to your structured data and your process management applications. And then finally, you can scale really the peak of knowledge where you have tapped all of the knowledge sources available within your organization. So out of curiosity, again, another just quick question for everyone is to understand a little bit about where you are in your cognitive process journey. So if everyone could take a minute and answer that. So it looks like as the results are coming in, most people, as expected, are still really identifying the right solutions, the right platforms, and a few of you are moving more towards coordinating, enhancing, and implementing some of these systems. So this is a very high-level picture, but wanted to kind of bring together from a little bit of a technical perspective what the conceptual architecture often looks like for these hybrid Watson, BPM, ODM types of solutions. And really at that top layer is where you have all of your engagement platforms. And Watson's, of course, engaging with customers across all of these different channels and platforms, again, due to its ability to understand natural language. So we can engage people on a desktop, on a mobile device. We can engage them over the phone in an audible conversation and even capture things like social media. And you're using Watson as that layer of intelligence and engagement on top of your business process management, really, so that orchestration of data throughout your organization is on top of any existing services that you have in place. And really the bottom level are all of your existing enterprise platforms, databases, warehouses, sources of information really are feeding upwards through this conceptual architecture. And so one of the things we always like to talk about as well on this notion of using Watson as your engagement layer, Watson differentiates itself from a lot of other, let's say, chatbots in its ability to actually understand the intent of a conversation and takes a much different approach than the traditional chatbot does. So most chatbots really still expect a predefined conversation flow, right? So if a customer calls into your call center, it may be, are you calling to file a claim, check the status of a claim, right? And they'll sit and listen through different menu options at each point in that decision tree. And these chatbots seek to just really create a different engagement platform for that same decision tree, where you are expecting people to engage in a predetermined flow. And it's really still functioning off of key phrases or words, right? So it's expecting you to say something very, very similar to file a claim. And it's looking for that phrase and those specific keywords in order to move to the next branch in its decision tree. So they function best on very structured data. You know, we would consider just looking for keywords or key phrases really still structured data. And they work well for short and simple tasks, but they have a hard time scaling to a broader capacity. Whereas a Watson approach is really saying, can we actually teach Watson to understand why someone's calling, to understand the way that people converse within this industry and this domain, and engage that person in conversation the same way they would with a person. So if they say, you know, I'm calling to file a claim for my 2005 Honda Civic, we know that we don't need to traverse them down the tree to collect information about which car was impacted and what the purpose of their call is. So it's really about seeking an ability to understand why people are calling. So driven by an intent rather than an expected flow, and guiding people through this conversation, leveraging both structured and unstructured data due to its ability to understand natural language, and are typically capable of a much wider range of tasks. They take a little bit more time to train because you're teaching it to actually understand natural language, but they will scale to a much broader capacity than a scripted conversation could. And so we're really using that as the entry point for the demonstration we'll provide, showing you how you can leverage Watson business rules and some of the business process management applications together in the demo that Graham is going to show you.
Sure. So a couple things. We have this demo live if anyone wants to see it afterwards, but we are going to show a video just due to, in order for the audio to come through, I have to lean really close to the headset. So one of the things you want to be aware of is when we're talking about cognitive claims, this is sort of how we're pulling this together. We're leveraging something called conversation. Conversation is what they call the chatbot, but the cognitive conversation that Christine just talked through. We're going to be extracting entities from that conversation and then using tonal analysis. Now, the great thing about this is that this could be integrated to your IVR. This could be integrated to your chatbot. All this stuff can be integrated into one system, and Watson doesn't matter. As long as it has the data, it can process and it can extract and it can tonal analysis. At that point, we're going to run a series of business rules. We developed a series of business rules in ODM and deployed them. And then if we decide that the fraud is likely, and one of the key things about the business rules is that we are leveraging some of the tone and intent. So one of the requests is, are they afraid? Are they scared? The conversation is also led by business rules as well. And then eventually we will go into, at that point, into BPM. We'll be writing some more business rules and some more as we gather whether it's fraud, whether it's claims, and processing it through that, leveraging the entity. So right now I'm going to share my desktop and run a video of our claims demonstration. And so what this is BPM, ODM, and Watson.
Hello, my name is James. How can I help you today?
Hi, my name is Nicholas, and I'd like to...
And as you can see, the text is auto-correcting, so it's being cognitive trying to figure out the intent of what's going on.
Is this an emergency?
Yes, I just got into a car accident.
Okay, make sure everyone is in a safe location. Have you called 911 yet?
Yes, we've called them.
Okay, good. While you wait for them to come, let's continue with your claim. In order to start the claim, I need to pull up your account information. I found an account matching your phone number. Can you confirm your policy number for me?
Yes, it is 959-827-349-857.
And as you can see, the claim was
Thanks.
shrunk
I
into
was
that.
able to verify your account. In case we get cut off, what is the best phone number to reach you?
Sure. It is 646-760-2201.
Got it. Let me write that down. Now I see you have two vehicles on your policy, a Honda and a Jeep. Which one do you need to open the claim for?
No.
I'm driving the Grand Cherokee today.
Okay. You are driving the Jeep with license.
So you saw that
WAT610.
here, he said he's driving the Grand Cherokee, and it also
me what happened?
figured out that that was a Jeep.
I was in
So
the
it's
car
taking
with
that
my
data,
daughter.
running
We
it
were
to the
stopped
fact
at
that
the
Grand
traffic
Cherokees
light
are
when the
Jeeps,
driver
and figuring out that
right up
you're
and
actually driving a
rear-ended
Jeep.
us. My head hit the front wheel and I started bleeding a little, but I'm okay.
Please take photos of damage to your vehicle and of the accident scene.
And what we're doing here is we're going to be taking photos, and then we're going to be uploading that to our BPM process all at the same time.
Your
having
case
Watson
number is
inspect those videos.
162. Was there anything else I could help you with?
And that's our BPD instance ID.
No, I'm good. Thank you.
Thank you for contacting us. We hope your issue was resolved satisfactorily. Good.
Now, before we continue on, there's a couple things you can do. You can do expressive voice. This does not have leveraging the expressive voice. We can certainly show demonstrations of that. You can then start to add all the tones, and it doesn't sound so Watson-y.
Then, as a claim adjuster, I'm able to log into my cloud instance of IBM BPM and to review my claims work items. And I can see that I have my claims 162 that I can open and review the details just captured by my virtual agent.
So what we've done here is we supported entity extraction. We've pulled out the policy, we pulled out the name, we've pulled out a bunch of information of what's going on. We took the geolocation data, we took out the accident description, so all the unstructured content. We analyzed all the conversation for fear, joy, tone analysis, and pulled that together. That's a really brief discussion on cognitive claims. Other areas that we're seeing it being more and more tightly coupled as long as you train your conversation. Christine will talk a bit more about training. But the idea is that we're training it to think like your agents. So Christine, do you want to take this case study?
Sure. So along this vein of using Watson as a conversational agent and engaging and capturing user interest, we created a Watson digital concierge at a software company that was really primarily focused on their biggest call center applications, which are really supporting software activation and basic maintenance tasks. So doing things like activating software, getting license keys, renewing license keys, performing upgrades, those types of things that happen quite often within this world of software. We created a Watson digital concierge to interact and engage with those customers 24/7 uptime, and they had tremendous results where they were able to lower their support costs by 90% and their resolution time shortened by 99% just by providing this 24/7 service where people weren't waiting for call centers to open or email responses to be received. And it was able to intelligently route the cases and tasks that resulted from these calls and these interactions with customers as well. So again, we kind of focused initially on training Watson to understand some of the basic tasks that they were being asked to perform, but happen very, very often. We're able to achieve these dramatic results by starting small and scaling that application out over time. And then I believe Graham will talk about the next case study.
Sure. So thank you, Christine. This would be an interesting case study because this was all about readmissions. So from from a claim perspective, one of the main things that they wanted to do was they wanted to understand what those readmissions were. We needed to be able to, as with Obamacare, we had to provide a whole bunch of metrics, and each state had their own rules around how those metrics were created. But what we've done is so for example, if you're familiar with, there's respiratory diseases that you need to flag them right away. And so what we did was we leveraged Watson and ODM to support not only providing the metrics, but also identifying the actual issue. So what we did was we ran Watson along all the doctor's notes. And so by parsing all the doctor's notes, we are then able to understand the intent of what the doctor was saying. So we were able to identify the COPD, and COPD is the respiratory item, the COPD readmission rate. So we were able to identify the cause of what was going on, flag them, and stop them from leaving the hospital. So what this did was it increased the improvement by 48% of whether or not this person should be let go from the hospital, and also was lowered the readmission indicators. And so the overall underlying thing is it supported two things. It supported improvement on the hospital overall, and then also supported the state and federal regulations that were encountered by Obamacare. This is a kind of an interesting one because, again, it's leveraging Watson to read all the unstructured content and ODM to run the business rules to make the actual decision. So we really have two ways of getting started with Watson and BPM, and Christine, feel free to jump in as well. But we have this idea of a Watson BPM workshop where we come on site and we support it. It's like a half day to a full day. We do process decomposition. We understand where your pain points are with your current systems, where you would like to apply cognitive, and define measurable goals to support your analytics implementation. So when you're trying to start your journey, this is a great way to put together a workshop, understand what you can gain out of it, identify what those KPIs are and those metrics are for your decisioning, and then build out what your execution is. And then the next thing is we do these innovation labs. So we spend time, as like a add-on to the workshop, we spend time working on designing your possibilities, building out a real-world prototype, leveraging your existing data, understanding the applications. But the idea is rapid prototype with your data to leverage BPM and Watson. Christine, is there anything else you'd like to add there?
Yeah, and really the goal is, again, most people are starting small to really understand what it means to train a Watson machine learning model, really to get a hands-on feel and for things like knowledge extraction and conversational interaction. So we're finding that these workshops and innovation labs are a great way for you to understand in a very hands-on way how Watson and BPM apply to your industry or domain and can really drive meaningful solutions. And so I think with that, we'll probably open the floor for a few questions.
Thanks, Christine. So at this point, we'll please feel free to ask your questions in the chat window. We did get a couple during the session that I'll go through right now. So one of the questions that we got is, in the scenario around scripted versus cognitive chat, is Watson used primarily to handle natural language processing capabilities?
So that's one of the
for you, Christine.
Yes, yep. So that's one of the components. Watson, again, has differentiated itself very early on. Some of the other major technology vendors focused on, let's say, more of a consumer-focused application. And IBM took more of an enterprise focus, which really was what was behind early things like Jeopardy, was an ability to understand natural language rather than just pre-training for very specific tasks. So Watson has really differentiated itself in the conversational aspect by its ability to understand natural language and the context surrounding it. So that's definitely one piece of it. And then you've also got an ability to do a knowledge extraction that feeds all of these other applications and processes.
Great. And if you guys have additional questions on natural language processing in Watson, please feel free to use the chat window. As far as, you talked to a couple use cases in insurance. What are some of the other scenarios that you have seen at clients around Watson and BPM and the applications?
Sure. So one of the things that we're seeing from a implementation perspective is definitely agent assist. So as the customer service rep is looking at their claim, leveraging the WEX side of the world to sort of pull together the knowledge base. So listening in on the call, translating that to text, and then executing a search for them while on the call. So it's really, how do I shorten that call time, and how do I shorten the resolution for the client? So if the client asks, is this covered in my policy? It would automatically search the policy documentation for you, pull out using that language processing, pull out the correct context and parse that for you, and pull you to the right documentation line. Christine?
I would agree.
Okay.
We also got a question around Cognos and Watson. How do those two technologies interact? And is Watson a separate package than Cognos?
So yes, Cognos would be what we would consider a very traditional business intelligence, business analytics platform. It's going to run primarily on structured data. So Watson is, again, mostly consumable as APIs. So a lot of times people are using Watson to extract structured information from their unstructured content, feeding it into things like their EDW, and ultimately Cognos becomes the platform that you're rendering your visualizations in and that you're fueling all of the insights from. And Watson is really feeding data to that Cognos visualization, essentially unlocking or untapping that unstructured content that Cognos can't understand beyond a keyword perspective.
Great. So at this point, we got a couple other questions, but for any that we didn't answer, we'll be reaching out to you with responses. At this point, we'll wrap up, give you guys all 15 minutes back in your day. But thank you, everyone, for attending. Graham and Christine, did you have anything else you wanted to add?
Not for now, but thank you for attending, everyone.
Great. Check us out online. We do a lot of blogs around similar topics. And thank you so much for joining us today.